Welcome back into the Hobby Letter podcast. Today we have Warren Carlyle. Welcome to the show, my friend, a master of fandoms. He understands it all. Thank you for coming on.
For sure. Excited to be here. We talk all the time, so now we get to spill all the secrets with your people.
Yeah, I know. It's just a more formal conversation, I guess.
For
We're gonna
sure.
do our best to keep it as informal as possible. So let's start it off with, the current lay of the land. I think this would be sort of an interesting place to start. So many people will say, they told me this in 2017, that it's too late to get started building communities on the internet. To that, you say what?
I mean, gosh, maybe it's too late to do something super broad, you know? Will there ever be a Nike again? I don't know. Will there ever be it's like a super broad, community more? I don't know. But as far as, to build a community that represents you and you creating a sense of belonging for a community of people that represent you and your interest, I mean, I feel like that could be done tomorrow and be wildly successful. So I guess for the people that want to go super broad, if you're an outlier, yes. But again, I mean, there's just too many people out there that are looking for a sense of belonging, and that's essentially what you can achieve with building a community. So yeah.
100%. We talk about this pretty often too, but it's like you can rise so fast now online, but the faster you rise, the faster you fall. So as more and more people rise quickly, what do you advise those types of people to do who have an audience now? They have a community, they're in a niche, but don't know what to do with themselves.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people that are chasing virality, and it's because it's really exciting. I mean, all the dopamine is there when you get millions and millions of views or something takes off. But what you should know is that kind of like destabilizes your existing community and your core audience. And I'm very conscious of, making sure that like the core group of people is always served. It's kind of like imagine like having a get together and then all of a sudden 400 people storm into the party and it's just like, wait a minute, what is this party now? Who are these people? Like, what's going on here? You have to like, retrain that audience and kind of like not, I don't want to say indoctrinate, but like, hey, this is the lay of the land. These are the rules here. These are the values that this community shares. This is what's going on here. And so for me, I'm a lot more I care a lot more about the community, like that core group of people. And for that, it's not like you have to go viral with every single post. If anything, that actually, kind of destroys that vibe that you want to create and hold dear to yourself. So anybody that I work with, who's interested in having like these nuanced conversations, wants the right people. They want to do very strategic collaborations, thoughtful partnerships, all of these things that aren't sort of growth hacky. They're very like you have to put a lot of thought and effort into why you do things and it's not just a decision you make just because you're like this would be cool, but like how is this decision going to affect my audience and my community is kind of where I come from every single time I make a decision on doing something.
Yeah, and you mentioned the dopamine hit from virality, and it's a loop that people can get stuck in, like broadening and broadening and broadening just to continue to get those sort of like virality hits.
Yeah, and if you think of like think of OctoNation, the largest octopus fan club, there's a lot of values that we hold. Like we're not an animal rights organization. So if people want us to come in and kind of like co-opt our organization to be like, hey, there's sushi restaurants that are eating octopus. Everybody here should be really, really mad. Imagine all these people storming into your community and being like, why isn't everybody pissed here? And it's like, oh, that's not what this community is for. And then you have another group of people that come in and they're just like, aquariums are a capitalist plague on society, and OctoNation believes that aquariums are on the front line of ocean conservation, accredited aquariums, and they inspire wonder of the ocean by, their programs, their services that they do, their rehabilitation efforts. So there's a lot of values that we have, and And again, it's kind of just goes back to you have to think more about that core group of people, because I feel like in the future, like you, it's almost like you want to make sure that that core group of people is happy. And if you just bring in a bunch of people because your ego says, I want 5 million people, that might not be what your community needs to be successful. I know plenty of communities that have less than 1,000 people and have seven-figure communities, as far as like a monetary like revenue of the community is. And so this whole idea that you need all of these numbers, to me, like I call them vanity metrics, where it's just like, okay, cool. Like, what does the engagement look like? What is the quality of the conversations look like in the comment section? Is there connection happening there? All these kind of intangibles that can directly lead to money later on. But if they're not there, then it's just kind of like you have this soulless community that, we've all seen the comments where it's just like, you're hot. This is cool. What, like, can't wait for next post. Neat, cool. Like those comments are not going to build like a sustainable community for you. You might, not care about that, but to me, in this conversation, like I'm huge on the community. So there's some people who are not optimizing for that, but I feel like if you want sustainability in this market, you have to start thinking about the community.
Yeah, I mean, 1,000-person paid community is going to do better than most influencers with 1 million followers,
Oh,
like
100%.
every day of the
Especially if
week.
it's reoccurring. Like that's the number one thing that I like, will get my creators to do, especially ones that have ADHD or neurodivergent. This whole idea of brand deals and, having a really good quarter and then having no money come in. It's like you need to create a reoccurring revenue model so you know what's coming in every single month so that you're not driving yourself crazy with, am I out of business now? So it's just some of the things that you gotta think about and set up as you're kind of beginning this job for yourself.
Yeah, because as a creator who's solely relying on brand deals, I mean, you're basically live betting on like four different things. You're betting on your an industry, basically. So let's
Hmm.
say you're in gaming, you're in, I don't know, some sub niche of gaming. You're betting that that is going to continue to grow and that there aren't going to be other creators who come in and are better than you, who take those advertising dollars. You're also
Hmm.
betting that your engagement's going to increase or at bare minimum stay the same. And then you're betting on your ability to output every day and not change and not give yourself room to change. And that is not a bet I would advise
Yeah,
anybody to make.
it leads to burnout every single time. And a lot of the creators that I was working with when I was doing consulting is they were burnt out and they were coming to me to find some sort of way of stabilizing, income or figuring out what programming with their community. When I say programming, it's like what, with Brittany Broski, you have like the Broski report and you have her that medieval program that she has where she interviews guests and things like that. Um, and with Hot Ones, that's considered a program. So you kind of have to think for yourself as a community. If you are like the Netflix or the distribution channel of like your given community or topic, like what programming will your community support you with? Even if it's $3, $5, $10 a month, what are they opting into as far as like your programming is concerned? And if you can get them to buy in early on and get 100 people, 200 people, 300 people paying you to produce programming, then you've really got something going. It's like kind of like PBS funded by viewers like you back in the day, where they would do all of these like telethon, like these money raising events so that you could continue PBS programming. I very much view it in the same way, except your own sort of like your own attention graph creating for your own community. And so with like OctoNation, if we are like the Netflix of octopus content, what sort of programming are we creating and what sort of programming can we get our community to buy into so that we can continue that programming in a meaningful way? So it's like Octopedia, the largest, most comprehensive field guide of octopus species online. Are they interested in that? Can I get them to fund that? Interview with an octopus, where Warren travels around and interviews octopuses all over the world and interviews the people that take care of them. Are they going to be interested in that? It's kind of like instead of selling to like these big time executives, you're selling one to many. And you're selling kind of like a ticket or a stake into like your programming. And I feel like that's the future. as kind of like we get more and more decentralized, you have to find that core group of people and get them to believe in your programming and feel like there's a need for it. Um, and they'll start doing it. I've done this time and time again with people that I've worked with, and now they're community-driven institutions where they can create programming and just run it, and they have distribution. And so that's what YouTube is now, you know? And so it's been really fun watching them kind of get really creative and think like, what do I want to create? Not like what eventually can I sell to a big distribution network to finally have made it. Like people are kind of past that point now. And I think the younger creators now are just like, why would I even heard it, I keep bringing up Brittany Broski, but I just listened to her on Colin and Samir. She was like, they were like, would you go on SNL? And she's like, no, I don't really think it's like, whereas before, like comedians or people like would give up everything to, to be to have made it. And she was like, I don't think it works for my brand anymore. And I'm just like, that's totally where it's going. Is like, like creators turning down like these bigger time media companies because it'll destabilize their community, and their community will be like, what are you doing? Like this doesn't make any sense for
I
you.
mean, we
I feel like
saw
that's
that like 5 or 10 years ago with big YouTubers trying to do it and then getting huge backlash and their community folding on them.
Yeah, I mean, you see that all the time. And like, if you're funded by your community, the last people you want to piss off for taking more money is that community because they're the first people that are going to call it out. Like your community, like with social listening and just kind of listening to how they're talking and what they're talking about, they're the first people to kind of get a sense for if you've changed or not, like what's going on. Um, and so you can choose to either, be like, oh, whatever. Like some people have like a weird relationship with their community where it's kind of like negative or, whatever. I don't personally work with anybody like that, but I understand there are people that have like toxic, relationships with their community and that works for them. But uh yeah, I just, there's all sorts of different ways to kind of wield communities nowadays.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, what creators have realized too is why would I go work for a company that has a worse business model than they could have on their own? Because if you go work for one of the big 10 entertainment companies, uh, you know, they're never going to pay you what you are worth to them. Otherwise, that is a bad deal for them. And on the community side, the more members of your community, the bigger community is, the less your cost per member is. It just goes down. And while that's true for companies like Disney, they just have so many other expenses and so many other projects. Heck, they run theme parks. They do so many things that have nothing to do with you. And you're going to be subsidizing all of that other stuff if you're any good at what you do. So why not just run it all yourselves, especially when the platforms and the internet just enables that? I mean, it makes perfect sense. You saw this like 10 years before everybody else, but now, myself and others are just starting to figure it out.
Yeah, I saw it with the first time I saw it was when I was working in New York and for a celebrity fashion photographer. And I noticed that the modeling agencies were kind of losing their talent to YouTube and losing their talent to Instagram because they started selling direct to consumer. And I thought, this is the future. Like talent is going to understand that they have something here and they can get with somebody else because they own distribution. So it's like, why not work for yourself? And I remember working in that space and starting to work with certain influencers that were artists, that were fitness influencers, and just going direct to consumer and then being like, why was I ever paying, 30, 40, 50% management fees to get a paycheck by this agency when literally I could have it all? Now they have to learn how to be financially responsible, which a lot of them weren't. But I mean, that's a part of being an adult. And adulting is figuring out, okay, now I need a money manager. Now I need to kind of like understand where all this is going, where my money is. But like again, that's kind of when I saw it, and I thought, okay, this means I can work with anybody that I want, as opposed to kind of like just getting fielded people. I could kind of pick and choose who to bet on and who was doing something in the world that like I actually saw value in. And so I very quickly just started working with people who I wanted to hold a microphone to. like, what am I really interested in? You know, what communities do I want to hold a microphone to because I think what they're doing in the world is really cool, and how can I build structure around them so that they can continue to do the work that they want to do. And that's when I kind of got scooped up by Meta for a while and started doing consulting with Facebook groups and helping them create more sustainable communities, create sustainable revenue. Because some of these communities had, you know, 2, 3, 5 million people, and they weren't generating any revenue. They were just doing this because they were super passionate about the community and they had full-time jobs. And I was like, wow, you all know that like at any point in time. And they're like, well, we don't want to exploit our communities. And I'm like, you're not exploiting your communities by offering value to them or creating more programming or resources that aren't in existence. And I kind of showed them what I had done, you know, with OctoNation and what I had done with other community leaders. And they were like, oh, wait a minute, like this would be really cool. This would be of extreme value. I'm like, yeah. And so we started, you know, charging some of their community members to create resources that didn't exist, and they loved it. And so they became businesses. So it's been fun to kind of watch that happen.
This is an ad, but it's an ad for my own company, thehobbyletter.com, which is a newsletter focused on helping you build your business, your personal brand, whatever you're trying to build on social, get more sales. It helps you do it. We share all of our tricks, insights from building multi-million follower media brands of our own to helping lots of our clients in all sorts of different niches, personal brands, my own personal brand, everything that we know, we share on the Hobby Letter. So if you like this kind of stuff, you have to go to thehobbyletter.com and subscribe. There are links in the description below. And I look forward to seeing what you think, and I will see you there.
Now, fast forward 5 or 10 years in the future, say, all the biggest companies, all the biggest traditional entertainment companies do in the ballpark of like, $100 billion a year in revenue. Let's
Uh,
ballpark at that. Do you think there are, $10,000 million communities in like 5 or 10 years? Like, what does it all look like? Do a couple people take all the market share? Like, what does happen in the past? Is everything just so niched out? There are all these little paid communities that do $1 million a year. Like, how do you see it sort of shaping out as time goes on?
You know, I've seen the toxic side of community, and I've seen the positive side of community. And you know, unfortunately, I've seen a lot of community leaders like weaponize their communities and go after and like attack or raid sort of chats and do things like that. Um, and right now, like when I think of even when the pandemic happened, I guess it's still happening. And people were wondering who to turn to. And it was just like, do we listen to Fauci? Do we listen to Joe Rogan? Do we listen to Andrew Huberman? Who do we listen to? You know, I think it's going to be really interesting in the future when it comes to all of these separate attention graphs. You're going to have to kind of pick and choose and be responsible, because what I've seen now, uh, and I think this is like a long answer to say that I truly don't know because I'm just operating within the interim right now, is I've seen a lot of people get rid of like their Netflix or get rid of Disney Plus or streaming services and just go full time and subscribe to a creator like Breaking Points by Crystal and Cigar, or my person who I'm working with, Emily D. Baker, is $9.99 a month for her app. And there are people that are just like, yeah, I canceled my Netflix and now I'm just tuned into this creator. And so it's really interesting. And I see a lot on mainstream news them trying to discredit, YouTubers or independent media creators, being like they're crazy, or you can't trust YouTubers. When these YouTubers, it's funny, a lot of them have way more schooling and way more like journalistic integrity, and they're actually not bought and sold by pharmaceutical companies or all these other entities that have a stake in these traditional media companies. And it's just funny to kind of like see the like the media companies try to kind of destabilize the creator economy.
Yeah.
And I don't even think it's really gone the other way, where they've like made a concerted effort, because they're just like, whatever, like you all can say whatever you need to. The more and more you talk about us, the more people come to us and kind of like get a feel for who we are and what we do. And then they can make up their mind on whether or not they want to stay or not. So it's such an interesting ebb and flow right now, that I'm like happy to be a part of, just because I believe in the people that I'm working with now. But yeah, there's just so much room in this space to kind of like put your stake in the ground, especially if you're, what I'm finding is like the biggest creators that are growing are like almost like boomers that are getting onto social media, and they're like, hey, I've lived my whole entire life. I have so much wisdom to share, and I know how a lot of this shakes out. And they're like shooting up to the very top because that's such an underserved market on YouTube and on social media channels. They're not used to seeing, these heavy hitting influencers that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. And so I've noticed that it's a very interesting, again, just a very interesting time we're in. And so, kind of like when we began, you mentioned, is it too late? I'm like, no. It's like, like
Yeah.
we're just at the beginning of it.
Yeah, it's I also agree by the way that older folks are the most underserved because there's no other quadrant that isn't served. I mean, there's too many babies, there's too many young people, there's too many, you know, every other group of everything you could think of in like the broad in terms of the broad niches. Not obviously there's room in every niche and every micro niche, but even like on a broad scale, there's not enough older people with more wisdom. And yeah, just like in real life, hits different. So
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of authority that comes with just like psychologically, for whatever reason, we're kind of built to be like, oh, I mean, I think there's like as it gets older, we're like, okay, no. But like there's this sweet spot where they feel like they've been on this planet for a long time, they must know something. And I feel like people now more than ever are kind of looking for a leader as like we go into this new cycle in these presidential elections. I think it's like a universally held belief that people are like, what is going on? Like, and so we're looking for people that are grounding energies and forces in our lives. And so we're looking to creators that explain things to us, that make us feel like everything is going to be okay. Um, and there are some forces out there that are kind of doing that. They're not afraid to go on live and talk for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours and just be like, hey, let's figure this all out together at scale, which is something that the media didn't really allow for. I mean, you have sound bites. That's where it came from. But now on YouTube Live, you can have somebody go live for 8 hours and just talk.
now you work with a lot of these people who have successful, in terms of happy audience and in terms of uh, monetarily successful, communities. Out of all the people that you've, worked with and seen and followed that have done a really good job, what are like some of the more surprising common denominators between them or qualities that you think they all possess that, the majority of people that fail at trying to build communities don't have?
I think they first give context, so they root people in something that's real. And this is how this works. And like when as it relates to like say if they're a health creator or they're just like with Emily, a pop culture legal commentator, she spent 17 years as a district attorney in Los Angeles, in trial and looking at things how like doing legal analysis, all of this research that you have to do to understand like how our legal system works. And so in a lot of ways, when she first got onto the scene, she just was just like, hey, I don't know if you all know how this works. Like, whereas you'd want it to work this way, that's just not how our court system is set up. Here's some context as to how this works and how this plays out. Now, if you're interested in changing that, this is how you would do it. But, so essentially teaching legal literacy through pop culture news stories became kind of like where like we can talk about really fun stuff, but at the base of it is real, like this is how like our legal system operates. And so even with other people that I've worked with, they have this thing where they're establishing at least a baseline literacy for something. Like even with like Andrew Huberman, you see that he establishes a baseline literacy. Now he might kind of like talk over, I would say, like the layperson's head just a little bit, but he's aspirational from the standpoint of like we want to know what he's talking about. And we get on this podcast, they're like 4 hours long, and we're just like, if I just get one or two things from this that positively impact my life, then I'm going to be in a better place. And so I think the common denominator, again, from like this grounding standpoint, or the reason people rally around certain people is because they feel like you feel like they're giving you like a baseline context as to how something works first before giving their opinion on something. They're like, okay, this is how it works. And then at the end, they're just like, if you were asking me, because everybody at the end of the day, they want to know people's opinion. They're like, this is what I think, based on all these facts, this is kind of where I'm leaning. And so, but I don't think they go straight into I think it's very easy to go straight into this is my opinion and get into emotions like anger. But I always tell people like anger and all of these fleeting, like they're not sustainable emotions. At the end of the day, people are going to cool off. And so when they cool off, what are they going to be left with? What have you really given them to like think about? And if you haven't given them anything of context, then they don't know what's at stake. Even with OctoNation, like establishing a baseline literacy for the octopus and helping people understand like they're cool animals and how their eyes work and how certain bite-sized pieces of information ideally leading to them becoming a little bit more curious about our oceans and understanding, hey, there are things that have existed on this planet far longer than we have. And so I think I can only speak to the people that I enjoy working with and the people that I see having a lot of staying power. And it's because they come from a place of education, establishing baseline context, this grounded energy that people want to rally around because they know, like at the end of the day, they're not going to spin people up. And when you think of even Joe Rogan, having the um, #1 podcast, it's like nobody can touch him. It's because at the end of the day, it's like he's really interviewing people and asking them what they think. And it's like love him or hate him. He's providing a space for like these nuanced conversations with such a interesting cast of characters that you really never know what you're gonna get. And I think people are desperate for kind of like that long form type of conversation because normally conversations and people's real lives are like shouting matches, which are just not fun to follow.
Yeah, or they're literally in like bite-sized snippets. You said
Yeah,
one
it's like
really
much.
interesting thing that I hadn't thought about, which is like around picking the right emotions.
Yeah,
Uh, it's so interesting because traditional entertainment would tell you the opposite, right? Like news is like basically gets you riled up for a living 24/7. You turn on the TV and they show you the craziest thing that's going on. But
it's never how we were wired. And I think people, it was great for people to make decisions. And I think, when it came to the media when I was growing up, I remember I'm a super sensitive, guy. I was diagnosed with autism when I was like in the fourth, actually, yeah, it was around the fourth grade. And I was became like if a commercial was trying to like make you feel something, I felt all the things. Like so if like there were dogs in cages and they were asking you to give money, I would run to my mom and be like, we need to give them money. Like
oh
all
my
these dogs
God.
are gonna die. Or like if there were kids or if there was whatever was going on, I was like completely overtaken with emotion. And I remember that as I got older and more grounded and realized, oh, like there was an objective there. There was a purpose for that as I've kind of gotten older and realized, oh, all of these emotions are kind of fleeting. And now that there are creators that have like this grounding energy or that will take time to explain how things work, I think people will gravitate more towards those individuals because even when you look at kind of like even with Oprah back in the day, the reason a lot of people rallied around her was because you felt like she was imparting wisdom on you. Did we watch shows like Jerry Springer and, Ricky Lake and for like the shock jock, whatever? Yes. But like, did we really remember? Like, do I remember an episode of Jerry Springer? No. But do I remember like some guests that Oprah Winfrey had on and things that I learned? Yes. So I think at the end of the day, when we're thinking about where we're choosing to spend attention, like the most of our attention, it's with the people that again have that are establishing that context, letting you know what's going on. Um, and those people I feel like are the future. And the more the media continues to try to do the same, the more they're falling out of relevancy, like even with celebrities. The more and more brand managers tell them, hey, you can't post, and it's been 5, 10 weeks, since they've posted, they're growing increasingly irrelevant. And it's just because our news cycle is just like, it feels like it's like a 8 hour news cycle now, when it comes to everything that's going on.
And then there's this element, you know, over time of the longer someone watches you, the more of a relationship they feel with you, which plays
Mhm.
really well to the person that owns their own, land per se, as opposed to being on someone else's network or show. Um, like I listened to Joe Rogan when I was, at the beginning of high school. It's
Yeah.
been a very long time.
Hmm.
And he hasn't really changed one bit. He's still the same
Yeah.
person, and he's
And
still
that's why when people mention like if anybody has like a very strong feeling about him, I'm like, do you listen to him a lot or did you just listen to that one episode? Because there are some episodes that I'm listening, I'm like, Joe, like you like stop. Like you are either high or you're this or whatever, like just stop
Yeah, I
talking.
mean, the guy dresses up in like costumes and drinks and smokes. Like, of course he's gonna say some terrible
Yeah,
stuff,
but it's kind of
like
like
everyone.
any friend that you have, you're just like if they have a bad day or if they have a bad take, you don't like completely destroy that whole entire relationship that you have with them.
That's
And
right.
that's kind of like how I feel about people that are consistent, online. You know, that's just, if they're providing a space for that sort of conversation or those interesting things, then like I'm there.
Yeah,
Lex Friedman,
everyone, you're
Lex
right too. Everyone's gonna have their moments.
yeah, it's like Lex Friedman came on the scene and immediately started doing these longer form podcasts with all these very interesting engineer type people, conversations that like most people don't have access to as a result of just not having the network. And I feel like, if you're going back to like, the people that are listening to this, some practical information for you, whereas like if you are like with me, with OctoNation, the largest octopus fan club, as a result of me wanting to build that, I have access to a lot of people that people don't normally have access to. Like, the people who produced My Octopus Teacher, or, James Cameron and Paul Rudd from Secrets of the Octopus that just filmed, or the slew of authors that have authored books on octopus. OctoNation has access to those people as a result of me building this platform really big. But even in the beginning, when I was creating programming, it's like I reached out to like the soul of an octopus so that that I could create something so that other people could watch it. I started feeling like I'm the one who's responsible for curating this content in a way that more people can enjoy it, because I know that not everybody's going to go out and ask for an interview with Simon Montgomery, the author of Soul of an Octopus. Nobody's going to take a leadership role and do that because they might not be as interested as I am. And so for you, if you're listening and you want to be the Netflix or the distribution channel of like your given thing, that you can be like, okay, who do I have access to, or who do I know about that is doing really interesting things, like even Buster with me right here, like fandom consultant. Who do I have access to that people don't normally have access to as a result of like they're busy or they don't have time to curate all the information in one place. And so I find if you truly want to do the thing that you want to do and create a community around something, all of a sudden you have to be like, okay, I'm taking ownership of the programming, and so I'm going to start creating content that I feel like my audience would be interested in. Um, and as a as a result of doing that, I'll create a sense of belonging for people that are just like, why didn't this exist before? Like my whole entire life, I wondered why isn't there a community of people that are obsessed with like octopuses? They're such a cool animal. And then I was like, oh, it's because nobody has taken the initiative to put a community together, and not only put a community together, but also put programming on top of that, layer programming on top of that community, and then layer collaborations on top of that community, and then layer merch on top of that community, and then layer all these sort of things that make OctoNation what it is today. There's so many different, I feel like, industries that can be kind of like disrupted, as a result of you uh, deciding that you're like, you know what, no one's doing this the way that I would do it. Nobody has the lens or the perspective in which I have. And so I feel like I'm going to do it. And to like give you an example, I was working with this one kid who he was training to be a soccer player, a professional soccer player, and he was working at a summer job. And the lift from this tire repair place fell on his foot and completely damaged all the nerves, and so he couldn't play soccer. And so he obviously his whole identity was shaken. And so I asked him a lot of questions because his mom was my friend, and she's like, he's in a really tough spot. And I said, well, what are you interested in? And, I just started talking to him about his life, and come to find out he really likes sports cars. And particularly, he loves Corvettes. And I said, after talking to him, we decided to create like the youngest Corvette community. And I was like, think about it. If you created this community, and you revitalized Corvettes for a younger audience, who would be interested in that? Hot Wheels, what other companies would be interested in you kind of grabbing hold of the attention of younger boys who are interested in Corvettes and having it be like a rite of passage, their dad passing their Corvette down to them, or all of these cool campaigns that I started to think
Yeah,
about. And he, created that community.
that's awesome.
And I think had he not had that community, he could potentially have taken his life as a result of his identity being so shaken. And so it's just like there's just so many examples of like communities that I've worked with and consulted with, and it all came back down to like, what is something that is sustainable for you? What is something that truly you can create a through line from like your childhood or something that's like you're interested in to your adulthood? And so it's a longer conversation for a lot of different people, but I feel like most people have an idea, unless you're like super multi-passionate, then it's kind of hard, but have an idea for what their community would be and who they want to create a sense of belonging for.
Yeah, it can be, you know, like it took me a long time to figure out what I wanted mine to be for as well. So I can definitely empathize with the people who have lots of different ideas and who have some different passions. I mean, I did it for something else. I did it for basketball.
Yeah.
And I decided that I didn't want to do that every day. So for the last few years, I've had a team that runs that. And I became super interested in, the great creators, investors, entrepreneurs of the new era and the old era and what we can learn from them. And that's how
Mhm.
the hobby letter came to be. But I think a good place to end would probably be on this sustainability point, uh, and not doing something for the sake of doing it, or not doing things that you're not passionate about because you think it has a big TAM, or like you think there's a lot of money in it, or you think you can grow it fast, or like any of these sorts of things, because A, if it was easy, everyone would do it, and B, you're going to get burnt out if you don't like it.
Yeah.
And you're not going to enjoy, like, that's the whole part of it. Like when I was building the basketball thing, it allowed me to interview like all the greatest basketball players of all time, some who are no longer around. And it's like, you know, you can't buy that. Like that's why you pick something you love, because you can't buy it. Like you're gonna get things that should make you really happy. I mean, I did sort of the same thing in collectibles, and it allowed me to meet all the biggest collectors in the world and talk to all the biggest collectors. Like the life benefits and the life value add, making money aside, audience aside, the personal life benefits of building a community in an area that you're passionate about are so underrated. Probably the most underrated part to me, because I never
Yeah.
hear people talk about that. But in terms of sustainability, how do you think about, when you're talking to other people who aren't really in the space, helping them pick something that will be easier to sustain?
I think, a lot of the people that I've worked with, you kind of have to decide whether or not you want to be like this curator, um, somebody who is curating content or developing programming and really taking that approach. And there's a lot of people who don't create communities because they think they need to be a consumer facing creator that's like, hey, everybody, this is something that I really care about. And that's not necessarily something you have to do. If you have like there are plenty of people who are like curate art and create exhibits, and things like that. And there's room for that online. So if there are certain information that you see, you're like, there's all this information, but it's not in one place. And like I want to create that space, then you can be a curator. Um, and like for OctoNation, I curated octopus photography. We have the largest network of underwater photographers in the world. I curated art, so people that did like large scale sculptures or murals. Um, I did octopus facts, education, and I curated it all in one place. It wasn't only until like 3 or 4 or 5 years in that I was like, you know what, I want to do some more. like, let me try it. And then I got in there and I was like, I don't know if I don't know if I want to be the face or to do this. And so I pulled back and I put my scientists forward, like my science writers. And so when you're looking at sustainability, one of the things that I had an executive leadership coach teach me as I've grown through this is understanding the difference between need and want. He goes, you'll typically decide very quickly if you want to do something. If you want to do something, you almost immediately do it. Like if you want ice cream, you're like, I gotta go get ice cream. I want it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Whereas if you go, oh, I need to, I should post today, or I need to post today. Somebody who's really, really interested in something, they don't like they want to do something, they want to post. And so if you find yourself saying need, then you should really reconsider your strategy or your programming because a need isn't sustainable. Like you constantly feeling need means like you're going to get into a desperation mode and you're going to get into a mode where you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And
Or you're
so
gonna put out some bad content.
yeah, like you're like, oh, I'll just repost this because I need to post something today and whatever. And so for me, I got very clear with my needs and wants, and I actually hired people. Like if I said, oh, I need to do this, I was like, no, I don't need to do that. Like I was like, I should, you know what I should do? I was like, I should all the new research that's coming out about octopuses, I need to read it, I need to write it, I need to be the first person that has it out. And I was like, I need to do that. I need to do that. And then all these articles kept coming out. I kept getting really overwhelmed with how much stuff that I had to cover. And I was like, we are dropping the ball left and right. But it was only me. I was putting so much pressure on myself. Nobody else was doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I became very clear. I was like, oh, I need to hire someone to do this. Like, I want to do this. Um, and so before you get to a place where you're burnt out, going back to sustainability, it's like really identify things that you want to do versus like delegate the things that you feel like you need to do and do
To
the things that,
someone who ideally wants to do them.
yeah. I mean, there are certain people who love doing certain things. Like I have artist friends who love doing like anatomy drawings and stuff like that. And then I have my creative director who's like miss me with all that. I want to do the really fun characters. I want to do the whatever. And so it's like you have to identify like the people who have an interest in certain things, especially if you just want to grow the impact of your community. For the longest time, I kind of held my community like with a death grip. I'm sure Buster, like in the beginning, you did too, where you're just like, nobody can do this the way that I can do this. Like
Yeah. Yeah. I
nobody,
was so wrong. I mean, we all were.
yeah,
Yeah.
nobody. And as I started working, and maybe it's the middle child syndrome, I'm in the middle of 7 kids, but I was like, wait a minute, there's people that could do things better. Like I'm not the master at all these different things. And so I hired, a team of science writers. I hired a blog manager, a creative director, a science advisor, like all these different things over time. Whereas before I was literally doing everything myself. I was writing the posts. I was like every aspect of I was licensing the content. But it became unsustainable very quickly. And I was like, I'm missing out on so many because I had the vision. I was like, I'm missing out on doing so much cool stuff. And I was like, yeah, because there's no way that you can do it all. And so, yeah, so going back to sustainability, like I think it's helpful, like, and your brain will automatically do it because like if you want to go to the gym, like you're like you're there. Like I can't wait to go. If you want to go running,
You
you're like
blink and it's
no
over.
days offsies. Like
Yeah.
you're out there, you're doing that thing. But the minute you feel like you need to do something and you're in this point of desperation, you procrastinate it and you're just like you start resenting yourself. You start being like, am I cut out for this? And it has nothing to do with whether or not you're cut out for it or not. It has everything to do with like your ability to delegate and to be a leader. And your brain will tell you almost immediately, hey, you don't want to do this. You know, you need to do it, but you don't want to do it, and that's okay. But you need to find somebody to do it. And that's like, that's when you gotta kind of delegate it. So
As
yeah,
always, you nailed it. That's
yeah,
the game right there. Thank you for coming on. If anybody doesn't follow OctoNation, it's a masterclass in fandom and community building. So please follow that. And yeah, as always, thank you for doing this. I love talking. So I'm glad. I think
cool.
we kept this pretty close to what a phone call would be, which is
Yeah,
all
for sure.
goal. So thank you.
Bye, everybody.
So yeah. Peace.